the word that Isaiah, son of Amos, saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem. In days to come, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and shall be raised above the hills. All nations shall stream to it. Many peoples shall come and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth instruction, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge between the nations, and shall arbitrate for many peoples. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more. O house of Jacob, come, let us walk in the light of the Lord. Prepare the way of the Lord. Prepare the way of the Lord. When does that actually start? I remember exactly where I was. I was on my way home, driving east on 340, just before the intersection, Staunton Road. I didn't care for the topic that was on NPR radio, so I reached down to turn the dial, thinking I would enjoy a few songs from a local radio station that plays the music I listen to. When the music came on, however, I immediately looked down at the numbers on the dial because I thought I had hit the wrong preset on the radio dial. Either that or I'd somehow fallen asleep and awakened a month later. For what was coming out of the radio November 1st was not a song from the 60s and 70s. Yes, that is what I listened to. But a very sentimental version of chestnuts roasting on an open fire. November 1st. Now remember our discussion last week about hurrying into Christmas? Even in late December, that song is not a favorite of mine. November 1st, it's intolerable. You remember the weather we were having November 1st? 75. We had a couple of 80-degree days. Probably not too many open fires going on in Clay County. I'm not sure. Does anybody know how to roast chestnuts on an open fire? Maybe Everett. But no, we don't. In the end, the fact the radio was playing Christmas music before we were still eating Halloween leftover candy. The fact that they were playing Christmas music really didn't upset me as much as I thought it would, but what it did was make me start thinking what was to come. What was my part to be? To prepare the way of the Lord. What does that mean? The problem is you and I get caught up in the need to orchestrate, plan, purchase, schedule Christmas. The images we see in the Christmas greeting cards and the advertisements about the perfect, ideal Christmas. You know the ones, the whole family's present and enjoying each other in loving harmony. The world around us completely full of beauty with peace on earth. Joy to the world, to every last person. A Merry Christmas for kids from 1 to 92. That ain't my Christmas. I don't know about you, but mine's the Christmas Vacation movie. Everything that can go wrong will go wrong. The worst possible moment. We find ourselves in this great tension during this holiday where we know what the season is supposed to look like, and we plan for what ours will be. But think about the world. Think about the world around us. On one hand, we know what the world is supposed to be, but we live with the reality of what the world actually looks like around us. We know we're meant to love, but there's a lot of hate. We know we were created to experience joy and peace, but we see sorrow and fear. We were made to thrive in health, and yet so many people we know or ourselves suffer in sickness and pain. Somehow we know we were meant to walk closely with God, and yet during this season, oftentimes God seems even further away. It's interesting that many of the Christmas readings throughout Advent come from the prophets. The prophets understood the great tension in life. Prophets in the days of old were not fortune tellers. They were spokesmen. Spokesmen for God. Now that's probably not a job anybody would aspire to have. Prophets spoke the truth, and sometimes the truth hurt, was uncomfortable to say, uncomfortable to hear. There is no evidence that prophets were ever invited to dinner a second time, because the message they were delivering the first time. Isaiah was this sort of prophet. If you read through Isaiah, and I encourage you to do it, you'll see why. He proclaims in one spirit everything that's wrong with the world, blames everything in the world on the sin of the people. He starts out this way. Ah, sinful nation, people laden with iniquity, offspring who do evil, children who deal corruptly, who have forsaken the Lord. Are you inviting him over for dinner? Isaiah was called to speak to the people of Israel. Because of the rebellion, God had allowed foreign nations to ravage Israel, destroy their holy city of Jerusalem, tear down their beautiful temple. And throughout all of this, Isaiah is reminding them that the world is not as it was meant to be. And the reason for that is that we have not trusted God. We've insisted on doing things our way. Am I talking about now or then? Isn't it the same? Some of the things happening in the world around us now, our behavior is the same. Life is hard, but it's not God's fault. It's our fault. We're the ones to blame. We forget our role. We forget our part. We forget that we're called to prepare the way. We are to make way the path of Christ. It's interesting then, in chapter 2, Isaiah changes his tune. He starts proclaiming how divinely ordained the hope of God is. In the days to come, the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established as the highest of the mountains. All shall be raised above the hills. In the midst of judgment, hope. In the midst of judgment, hope for the world. I love the image Isaiah puts before us here. Do you remember the picture that was on the screen when you came in? What was it? Mountains. mountains. There will come a day, he says, when the Lord will judge between the nations. They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Isn't that a beautiful thought? A beautiful thought at the way the world should be. God said to us, you will enjoy this gift of this earth. You will cultivate the earth. You will care for it. You will turn the wilderness into a garden, even a city, where creation can thrive, where creation can prosper. He gave us a command. Gave us everything we needed to carry it out. God gave us minerals to take steel, to fashion plowshares, pruning hooks, the sort of tools which would enable us to create, to cultivate, to build the world as it was meant to be. What did we do instead? Yeah, we made some plowshares. We made some pruning hooks. But it only takes 4 chapters in the book of Genesis before one person takes up arms and sheds the blood of another person. And has the bloodshed stopped since? Left to our own, there's nothing we can ever do to change this. Apart from God, human beings are always going to take the resources that we have to make swords and spears. Thankfully, however, judgment is not all that we should see. In the midst of the broken world that prophets were giving us, Isaiah gives us a mountain. A place that will rise above the death, rise above the destruction. And notice Isaiah tells us that the nations of the world shall stream like a river to the summit. Can rivers run uphill? With God. That's the power of hope. That's the great extent to which God is willing to transform the world, to make things that rarely happen, happen. If the way is prepared. If the way is prepared. In the ancient tradition of the church, Advent, this season that we are beginning, is a season of waiting and preparing. It's actually what Advent means. To wait for the coming. Advent is not a season necessarily of celebrating and feasting, like we have turned it into, but one of waiting, of preparation. This is hard for us, you and me. It's hard for us in a culture where we want to jump right into the parties, the enjoyment, the celebrating, the gift giving. But thankfully, there's more to it. A story. A story and an apology to Kay. Last Sunday, Kay, who had taken on the role of pulling the family baskets, food baskets together, was in the process of pulling all this food together, and she had Ron, and she had several people helping her. I avoided Kay like the plague. Selfishly. If I got too close to Kay, she might want me to deliver one of those baskets. I did not want to deliver one of those baskets. And I don't know why. I don't know why. There was just something, it just felt uncomfortable. So I worked in the sanctuary and walked way out wide around Kay to get to the kitchen. When it was time to go back to the sanctuary, I walked way out wide, even out the doors. I started feeling very guilty. So late in the process, I walked up to Kay and said, basically, do you have everything covered, or is there one that I can deliver? Hoping she would say no, that it was covered. Kay's response was, great, that would help. There's one. And there was one that was on my way. If you know where I live on Hendricks, way out before you get to Kennedy's Crossing. There was one that was spitting distance off of Hendricks. Made sense. I already knew where the house was for me to take it. Prepare the way. So I did. Pulled in the driveway and got out of the car and started carrying, it was a large box. The house I had several kids, so it was a large box. I went up, set it on the porch, and the door opens. And this lady walks out. And I asked if her name was the name that I was supposed to meet, and she said yes. And right on her heels was the cutest little 7 or 8 year old you could imagine. He was all dressed up. And I set the box down, and he immediately stepped forward. I am glad to meet you. Well, there's some melting going on right there. Okay? Little 7 or 8 year old with his hand out saying, I'm glad to meet you. And we made some small talk. Cute little boy. And as I finished up, he said, thank you. I just about got out of there. But I turned to walk away, and I heard him say, and that's why it's in your bulletin, Mom, look, they put hats and gloves in the box. I don't have any of them. He was more excited about the hat and the glove than the food. Because that's where his need was. Now, I live maybe 1.5 miles down the road. So I should have been able to get home. I could not. I was pulled over in Brazil Trucking parking lot. And it made me wonder, what are we preparing the way of the Lord for? Are we preparing the way for Christmas parties? Are we preparing the way for food? Are we preparing the way for gifts? For the excitement and joy that we get in giving, and when we receive? Are we preparing the way to just survive and get through the stress of the holidays and appreciate January? Or are we preparing the way of the Lord to get into our hearts, to help us experience that love? Are we preparing the way of the Lord to get into our souls so that we can appreciate what we have, but also see the world around us? Are we preparing the way of the Lord to get into our spirits, to want to reach out, to be, to give, to do? What are we preparing for? Before I got to that house last week, I thought I knew. After that, not so sure. Prepare the way of the Lord. What should it mean for each of us? Amen. O God of all seasons and senses, grant us the sense of your timing, to submit gracefully, to rejoice quietly in the turn of the seasons. In this season of short days and long nights, of gray and white and cold, teach us the lessons of endings, the lessons of children growing, the lessons of friends around us, the lessons of loved ones close or far from home. Better yet, teach us the lessons of grieving, of grudges, of blaming, of excuses. God, this morning, grant us the sense of your timing. Teach us the lessons of beginnings, that such waiting may be for loving. That waiting may be planting the seeds for a better tomorrow. That waiting truly is preparing. God, grant us a sense of your timing, that we will realize now is the time for a deeper relationship with you, a fuller relationship with you, one grounded in your love, in the fullness of all that you are. God, give us a renewed understanding of Advent. A renewed understanding that as we are called to prepare the way for you, that will require a change in our hearts, a change to love. It will call for a change in our souls, a change to understanding and awareness. It will require a change in our spirit, a change to action, to outreach. Be with us now as we pray to you and say your words. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Bless us today our daily bread. Forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power,